The Morristown Green, a central park echoing with the footfalls of Washington and his compatriots during the Revolutionary War, is not merely a serene escape, but a living testament to the town's pivotal role in shaping our nation. Morristown's history seamlessly intertwines with every individual who grew up there, creating a childhood rich in the echoes of the past and a vibrant spirit of community carried forward by each successive generation. These are their stories. This is Beyond the Green.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Green, where we talk about everything Morristown. I am Peter, Morristown High School Class of 90, and you are?
And I'm Terry, Morristown High School Class of 87.
Ooh, yeah, we're almost, we got handicapped parking waiting for us somewhere around the green.
No doubt.
So, we got some really good feedback from our first episode, and one of the conversations I've had after our first episode, which can be found either on YouTube or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I talked to Ted France, who runs one of the Morristown pages on Facebook, and we sat on the phone and we kind of discussed what we're doing, and he gave me some great leads. So last week, while you were running around Seattle, I decided to take a trip into Morristown, and I sat down with an individual. His name is Robert Guinter, otherwise known as Bobby G. He is a fellow alumnus, class of 1970, and he lives on Mill Street. Coincidentally, literally across the street from where our cousins lived.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a So that was a little bit of a surprise for me. But that interview was a 30-minute interview. Altogether, I spent about 90 minutes with him, but we got 30 minutes of it on film. And it was really, really enlightening. And it's just hang tight, folks. Watch this video. Bob does a great job. He is a plethora of knowledge about Morristown. He has lived most of his life in Morristown, but he definitely knows the intricacies. So without further ado, here is our interview with Bob. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Green. Today we are sitting with longtime Morristown resident and Morristown High School alumnus, class of 1970. Please welcome Robert Guinter to the show, otherwise known as Bobby G.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story growing up here in Morristown?
Oh, my story. My story starts much earlier than we moved to Morristown. My father bought this house in Morristown, in 1958, and I remember as a very young boy. In 1958, I was 6 years old. I had just finished having my first year of school, which was kindergarten. And I remember being in the back seat of my father's car. He had a 56 Chevy at that time. And we followed the moving truck to where we were going to move. We were living in an apartment at that time in Madison. So it was about 5-6 miles away. I followed the truck, looking out the back window, watching my home disappear behind me. And in July of 1958, we pulled up in front of this house in Morristown on Mill Street, which had been empty for some time. So it was really something to look at when we got here. There were two boys standing on the sidewalk when the moving truck pulled up, and they became my best friends. Two Bobs. There was Little Bob and Big Bob, and I was the new guy. So on that moment, in the afternoon of July 18th, 1958, I was unceremoniously named New Bob. So I became New Bob of Morristown for the rest of my life, essentially. I've never outlived that name. New Bob. I'm the new guy. So anyway, I was the newcomer. We came here from Madison, but my history started much, much earlier than that. The name is Guinter, and it's derived from the German name Gunther. There were three brothers in the late 1880s. The late 1800s, 1880s, I'm assuming. I don't know the exact date. Three brothers named Gunther, with a traditional spelling, German spelling, that emigrated from Germany, came to the United States, and upon immigration, they changed the name spelling subtly differently.
Sure.
One, Guinter, Guinter. One kept Gunther, and the other changed it to Ginder, Ginder, of which I met the man who told me this story in 1972.
Wow.
I met the man, Ernest Augustus Ginder, and it was at a dojo where I was working out. I was a martial arts trainee at the time. And during one of those moments when we were trying to let the sweat dry off, Ernie and I sat down on the mat, and we started talking about how interesting our two names sounded. And Ernie's uncle was the same uncle that my father had, Arthur Guinter from Mountain Lakes. Ernie Ginder was his uncle also. He was the one that originally told me the story about the three brothers. So Ernie was the one that knew the story.
Yeah.
And then I asked my mother about the story, and she confirmed it because she had heard from other sources in the Guinter family. So that's where we came from, and we originally started. It was three brothers immigrating to the United States, and they just changed the spelling of their German name. Why did they come here? To this day, I have no knowledge of exactly why, but I know there was massive immigration back in those days. A lot of people from Europe, from all different nationalities and different countries were emigrating and moving to the United States at that time. So it was common.
So is your name at Ellis Island?
I assume it should be, if Ellis Island even existed at that time. I'm not sure they even
when did they
went
come
through Ellis Island.
Was this late 1800s?
1800s.
It may have.
It may have.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. So I find even so lifelong in Morristown, right?
So far, except for 18 years of marriage living in Somerville area,
Right.
I have lived here at this house in Morristown, and the family has owned it since 1958.
Right. So you've seen a lot of changes in town.
I've seen changes since 1958. Yeah,
So,
a lot of changes.
Over the last 60 years or so, what do you say, would you personally say was one change that was for the best and one change that you wish it never happened?
I can't say that there are any changes that have happened that I would disagree with or say I wish never happened.
Okay.
The town right now, for somebody my age, and I'm 72 now, is literally perfect for me.
Great.
I don't walk well anymore, but as of a few years ago, a simple walk downtown was a piece of cake.
Yeah.
My banking is downtown. My favorite restaurants are downtown. Suvio's Pizzeria is a short walk away, which we went to Suvio's when I was a boy.
Yeah.
It's been there that long.
Yeah.
The high school and the grammar school that I went to are so close. The memories that get recharged every time I pass.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating. And so now there are a lot of people I know that gripe about the construction of the higher buildings, the high-rise buildings in Morristown, but I don't begrudge those. This is progress. This is where new companies are coming in and they're buying property and they're refurbishing buildings that had to be demolished because they were literally crumbling to the ground anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, I don't have anything that I think is a really negative change in Morristown.
Okay.
Everything that's happened here has helped me in my life, later years, to be able to function.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier, and we're discussing how you worked at Sandoz for 10 years. So
Yes.
when you're at the high school, would you say was there any one or two teachers that kind of influenced you to go work at Sandoz or in your
No,
engineering?
that's an interesting story in and of itself of how I got to Sandoz. How did I manage to get to work there? Well, I was working a job right after high school. I was supposed to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to go to FIT.
Okay.
I was accepted at Florida Institute of Technology. And for a nerd like me, that was the ideal place to go.
Yeah.
Because NASA was there and the space shots and everything were going off from there.
Yeah.
That was where literally rocket science was evolved.
Mm-hmm.
However, I fell in love with a local girl and didn't want to leave. So I decided to change gears.
Yeah.
And I went to Newark College of Engineering, started going to Newark College of Engineering, my
Mhm.
second choice school,
Mm-hmm.
instead, so I could stay home. While I did that, I scoured the Morristown Daily Record looking for a part-time job,
Mm-hmm.
and I found a job in East Hanover at a company that manufactured oils and greases. So
Mhm.
I took a laboratory job. It was my first regular job.
Mm-hmm.
9 to every day, 9 to 5. And my schooling was nighttime at that time, so I was going to school at night. So it all worked out. I had money in my pocket. I was getting the credits I needed a little more slowly than if I had gone full time, but I was going part time. And everything was working out fine. So here's what happened.
Okay.
How did I wind up at Sandoz? I'd had a traffic accident. It was not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sideswiped my car downtown, and the car had to go into the shop for a while. So I had to hitch rides back and forth to work. And one of the fellows that I worked with at this company in East Hanover lived in Morristown, so I asked him, "Can I hitch rides with you home?" "Sure, why not, for a while." I didn't know him very well, but we got to be good friends. His name was Steve. His wife worked at Sandoz, and she was a real chatty Cathy. So I would sit in the back seat on the commute home. She would sit in the front seat, but she always turned around to talk to me.
Yeah.
And we chatted and chatted and chatted. And one day I asked her, "How did you get your job there?" She says, "Oh, I just walked in off the street and filled out an application." Well, that put the idea in my head. Rather than looking through the newspaper, you're looking for another job? Hey, I wanted to progress a little bit. Sandoz was a much bigger company than what I was working for.
Mm-hmm.
When my car was repaired a couple months later, I did the same thing. I drove up to the front gate one day, told the guard I wanted to fill out an application for employment. They gave me a temporary pass to go in. I went to the human resources department, filled out some paperwork, and was hired on the spot.
Wow.
I worked there for 10 solid years after that. That was 1973. That was September 1973. And that was where I met the woman that would eventually become my wife and bear my children. So that traffic accident that occurred to me, oh boy, was I upset when that happened. Put my car completely out of action. I couldn't drive it. It was undrivable. Had smashed the whole side of the car in. Luckily, none of us were hurt, but the car was damaged beyond the point where I could drive it every day.
Yeah.
And because of that dark cloud, the silver lining in that dark cloud was My 2 children evolved from that event because I would never have met the woman who became my wife otherwise.
Yeah.
We had no other paths cross over that time period.
That's why they say everything happens for a reason in life.
So over the course of time, I've always wanted to go back and thank that person for his idiotic move that he did that caused the side swipe of my car. His name was Jeffrey Kadadich. Now, James Kadadich was his brother, and his brother is the one that is still serving time, to my knowledge, for a couple of heinous crimes here in New Jersey back in those days. But Jeffrey was the brother who I knew. I knew Jeffrey all through grammar school.
Okay.
Jeffrey was the one who hit my car. And as a result of that, my life changed for the better.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's my history of my children's history, really.
But looking back and talking about, growing up and going to high school here.
Right.
So you're in high school, late 60s. What was for a teenager here? What was the nightlife? What would you guys do on a Friday night? Where would we find you and your friends?
Oh, cruising the green. My father, in his wisdom, bought a Camaro at that time when it was time for me to get my driver's license. And since I started kindergarten a little bit late, I was a late comer going through school. Actually, a lot of the kids in my classes were younger than me. So I got my driver's license early.
Okay.
I was early junior in high school when I got my driver's license. So most of the kids didn't get their driver's license till late in their junior year. I already had it right at the beginning of my junior year. I already had my driver's license. So we would cruise the green, and then I had a friend who I grew up with in Morristown who had moved away, and he lived in Madison a few miles away. So I'd travel there at night, and we'd hang out together. But what did we do? Oh, there was plenty to do. There was the movie theaters downtown. There was multiple movie theaters. The community theater was a popular one on South Street. Yep. And the Park Theater was another one right there on the green, actually.
Is that what turned out to be the triplex later on?
I don't remember no, it's not the triplex now. The triplex didn't exist at that time.
Okay.
That was part of the urban renewal project.
Okay, on Washington Avenue there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was Park right on the theater you're
Park was right on the square.
Yeah. Really? Interesting. Okay.
And we would go to the movies there.
That's great. I mean, what was for you guys like now, or I graduated high school 20 years after you did, but were the diners like that were popular when I was in high school?
Lackawanna Diner was very popular.
Yeah.
And we would go there on weekends after a date.
Yeah.
And get a late breakfast. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was very popular.
Yeah.
There was a Carvel ice cream shop across the street. Yeah. That was very popular too. But nightlife for me, I wasn't a big nightlife kind of guy back then. I was more getting up early and going into the school early. First class was usually around 8 o'clock, but I'd be in school at 7.
Right.
I'd get up early deliberately to go into school early.
Right.
And we had a group that met for so-called study.
Yeah.
From 7 to 8 before our homeroom class.
Sure.
We didn't do a whole lot of studying. It was more for the camaraderie. We had a music box. We would play our favorite music. We had a couple radio stations, FM radio stations that came in there. So we would play the radio, and we just chit chat and have fun talking with our friends. And if we had to do a little studying for an exam later, we would do that too.
Yeah.
That was more of a morning life thing for me. I didn't stay out late in those days.
And I just want to switch gears really quick, and you know how you and I have talked about a little bit about the
the revolutionary history here in town. So, I wasn't born until 72. So, I was 4 years old when the bicentennial was in 76. But I've seen the photos and I just don't remember it. Can you just talk about the bicentennial here in Morristown with its rich history of the Revolutionary with Alexander Hamilton and George Washington? What was that feeling like here during that time? During the
I don't have
bicentennial?
any real strong feelings of that, to tell you the truth. Really. We grew up here, and during our school days from grammar school on, we were studying revolutionary history.
Okay.
There's a lot of revolutionary history here. I actually took in my undergraduate days in college, I actually took colonial and revolutionary history as a minor. Not as a minor, but I mean as a
like an elective course?
As an elective, as a humanities elective,
Sure.
because I wanted to study it. And I studied about the invasion of that came through the Hobart Gap, and how the militia, was able to withstand that advance of the mercenary troops that came through the Hobart Gap. The Hobart Gap is in the Watchung Mountains, and it was the main route to get out of New York to come into New Jersey and get to George Washington's troops who were stationed here in the winters. Stationed here in
Jockey
Hollow Park.
Yeah. And just so we were talking about before we moved on to something else, just talk about so what is your favorite restaurant now? We're talking about Suvio's. Everybody loves Suvio's.
Restaurant.
Is there a restaurant that you love that is no longer here?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
Cottage 2 right now is one of my favorites. That's
the Chinese
restaurant? That's an Asian restaurant on the other side of town.
Yeah.
There's the Golden Dragon that's here on Speedwell Avenue.
Sure.
That's also very good.
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite restaurant. I would go out of town for absolute favorite.
Which is what, Bob?
Casa Maya.
Where's that?
Casa Maya is in Myersville.
Okay.
You have to go through the Great Swamp.
Yeah.
Get over to the other side of the swamp area.
Okay. So.
And it's Mayan food.
Interesting.
Spicy Mexican Mayan food. Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
It'll get you up and walking. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Bob, I'm going to switch gears now. Before we sat down here today, you handed me a printout of an article regarding the underground tunnels that exist underneath Morristown.
Subterranean tunnels underneath Speedwell Avenue. And this very few people know about.
And like I said to you earlier, I'm really puzzled by this. However, I'm going to let you get into it. Just a quick synopsis that there's actual Prohibition tunnels that run through Morristown. So why don't you talk about that and a little bit of the history?
Speedwell Avenue in Morristown has a network of tunnels that were built underground during Prohibition era. They brought in bricklayers from, I'm not sure where. I think they were Italian bricklayers, to tell you the truth.
Bob, when you refer to them, are we referring to the mob or the mafia?
I would guess.
Okay.
I'm not certain of who brought these people in or paid them or, contracted with them to build these tunnels. But they built tunnels underneath Speedwell Avenue. And they actually built areas where they would distill liquor underground. There's also a tunnel that goes under and crosses the tunnels of Speedwell Avenue of the Atno Avenue brook that exits from the ponds at Burnham Park. That water flows through the tunnel, goes down to the Whippany River, down at the bottom of Martin Luther King Avenue, which used to be called Evergreen at the time.
Right.
Now that tunnel existed during the Prohibition. It's what they used to dispose of the waste product from their distillations.
Yeah.
Now, my grandfather and my mother's mother and father, my grandfather and my grandmother, they met in one of those speakeasies. That's where they met one another.
That's crazy.
My grandfather was a piano player and
Yeah.
played piano in one of those speakeasies. And my grandmother was a young woman that lived on Bud Street and went for the afterlife in the speakeasy and met my grandfather to be there.
Do you have any photos of them in the speakeasy? Any photos do we know that exist?
No, photographs from that time were very. No, unfortunately, I don't have any. I only have the stories that are told to me through my mother.
Okay. But like you were telling me, is that part of that river runs behind the high school?
It runs through underneath the high school field.
Mm-hmm.
It runs underneath the concrete bleachers to Atno Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
where the tunnel begins at Atno Avenue and goes under Atno.
Mm-hmm.
It goes under Clinton Place all the way over to Speedwell Avenue, and then it dives down on the opposite side of where the Hyatt Hotel is now. Underneath the Hyatt Hotel, it dives down and goes down to Whippany River at the bottom of Martin Luther King.
So do you think when they redeveloped that piece of property, which is now Headquarters Plaza and the Hyatt Hotel,
that's when they found it?
Yeah.
That's when they found the tunnels that had been abandoned for years.
Did they fill them in, I guess, at the time?
To my knowledge, they did not, but I'm not
Really?
sure.
They kind of speak. That's kind of crazy that they didn't. Who knows?
And some of us boys, back in the 1960s, we actually got into those tunnels.
Yeah.
Now, how did we do that? We followed the Atno Brook. When it goes underground, under Atno Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes all the way over to Speedwell, and when it crosses Speedwell, it crosses the brick line speakeasy tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us boys who were adventurous in those days, we actually walked, flashlight in hand, through those tunnels and got all the way into the Speedwell Avenue area.
Was there any?
One of the boys I know actually walked the tunnel downhill all the way to its exit at the bottom of Martin Luther King Avenue.
Wow. So then it crossed over Spring Street then, what is now Spring Street.
Yeah, Spring Street
Runs right behind that piece of property.
Actually, I guess it went parallel to Spring Street.
Okay.
Probably, now that I'm thinking about it, it would have had to be a parallel.
Okay.
Following the pathway of Spring Street, but underground.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's just like I said to you before, this is history I've never heard about. This is 1920s, 1930s history in town. And I just feel like this is part of like the hidden history of Morristown.
It is.
You know?
It certainly is, yeah.
Was there, when you walked those tunnels, was there any type of graffiti or anything on the walls?
No, I do not remember any graffiti on the walls inside the tunnels.
Okay.
There were only a few of us boys that were brave enough to go.
Okay. So then they were pretty much unexplored, except for the very few.
Except for the town's maintenance crew who knew about them and maintained their they maintained them for drainage, proper drainage. The town water department, I'm sure, knew about them in those days.
Yep. And then another story I just want to touch on with you is what we've discussed once or twice is about the street we're on now, Mill Street, and the Mills family.
Mill Street was a very interesting street. Yes. Yeah. When I got here, it was already paved.
Mm-hmm.
What was it prior to that? I don't know. So 1958, it was paved, and the sidewalks were slate. They were smooth slate sidewalks. They were very nice sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
The slate stones were 5 foot by 3.
Okay.
So it was a good wide sidewalk.
Yeah. And
we used to hopscotch on it.
Yeah.
Ride our skateboards, and in those days, skates with a skate key.
Right.
We would skate on the slates. They were so smooth.
And when did they move and create concrete after? Was it an issue?
That was done, my father died 22 years ago, and it would have been about 25, 30 years ago. They replaced the slates. They were all starting to crack.
Gotcha.
Now, if you go over to Maple Avenue
Mm-hmm.
and those side streets between Maple Avenue and McCullough,
Mm-hmm.
they still have the original slates that are still in better shape. And if you go down South Street,
Yeah.
where the banks are,
Mm-hmm.
on the let's see, east, that would be the north side.
Okay.
On the north side, by the banks and the I'm thinking it's one of the churches. They still have the old slates,
Mm-hmm.
but not many areas in Morristown still have the old slates.
Yeah. So were all the sidewalks in town made out of slate then at one point in time?
All the ones in this area around
Okay.
Mill Street,
Okay.
they were all slate. Yes.
Okay.
There was no poured concrete sidewalks like we have now.
Wow. Okay.
And it was very interesting for us kids.
Yeah.
Because the water department, when they put a water line that went under a sidewalk
Yeah.
slate, they would put a marking on it that looked like an H.
Okay.
It was just to show where the line was, where the water pipe went under.
Okay.
But we kids, when we saw these H's,
Yeah.
we knew darn well you had to jump over them. Because if you stepped on one, you were going straight to hell. That's what the H stood for when we were 6 years old.
That's Morristown
H
legend.
blocks.
Yeah.
H blocks. There is only one remaining H block anywhere in town that I know of because I've looked for them.
Okay.
5, 6 years back, I was searching the town to see if there was any more of those H blocks.
Yeah.
There's none that exist except by the church across from the library.
Okay.
It's on one of the slate curbstones.
Okay.
That's the only place I know where it still exists. The last ones to be removed were when the A&P was taken over by what's the company that runs it now? It's the A&P used to be down at the bottom of Washington Street.
Are you talking about Whole Foods? Whole Foods, yeah.
Yeah, when Whole Foods upgraded their front, a couple of the slates were removed, and the water department had to replace some piping. So probably at that time, one of these projects took away the old H block stones that were in place.
Yeah.
But those are gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, as kids, we had to hop over them. Every time we went to school, it didn't matter how many books we were carrying, we had to hop over that block. We weren't allowed to step on it.
Bob, I just want to say that these stories you're telling us about Morristown have just been amazing. We are so, so grateful for you to take the time out and to sit with us. We really, really appreciate it. It's been an honor.
This is my pleasure, by the way.
I appreciate it. And I'm hoping in the future we can sit down again and you can tell us more secrets about town.
Absolutely.
So what do you think about Bob's interview?
That's unbelievable. I mean, the tunnels I think I had heard about because I remember when they were excavating Headquarters Plaza, and I think in the Daily Record they were saying that they found Prohibition bottles. Well, now we kind of know why, but
yeah. And in a way, I'm glad I didn't know about this earlier.
Yeah.
I just fear that I would have gotten stuck in some tunnel somewhere, and
Well,
like
the investigative report. That's
yeah. And like you said, off camera, this is very much only thing that this story is missing is Geraldo waiting at the opening for Bob and his friends to come out of there. But it's again, I don't know about you, but these are stories that we've never heard about before.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is, whether, I think the town is so Revolutionary War centric. Nobody really thinks about the Prohibition, the early, late 20s, early 30s in Morristown. Nobody makes that connection that, there could have been speakeasies, subterranean nonetheless, in Morristown, Well, but hey, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it when we had Jim on in the initial episode, from the 1870s, 1880s, all the way through 1930, basically the stock market crash, Morristown was a hotbed of wealth. Some of the wealthiest people in the country, maybe the world, lived there. The same individuals that had mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, had homes in Morristown.
Yeah.
And so you think about the revelry and the parties and things like that, and it doesn't surprise me that there was not only speakeasies, but it was an intricate, operation in terms of
Yeah.
that.
And now when we remind me of that, it leads me to believe, I jokingly asked if it was the mob who paid for these masons to build these tunnels. But if the money was there already, who's to say that the rich didn't build their own tunnels, had
Right.
their workers who built their homes for them potentially could have built these tunnels just for their own
Enjoyment.
entertainment. Yeah.
Right.
You
Right.
know, because there's also stories that I believe there is a few homes also in Morristown that are part of the Underground Railroad.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, I've seen some columns in some homes or were hollowed out to house to hide some of the slaves that were coming up from the south as they were coming up north. That's another story for another time that we'll talk about. But again, I want to thank Bob Guinter. I think Bob, I cannot wait. Hopefully when you come back out east, we can go sit with Bob. We'll take him for a ride. We'll stop at Suvio's, get him. We'll buy the guy 3 or 4 pizzas so he doesn't have to leave the house.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the richness of the history of Morristown. It's not just the history itself, but the people who can tell those stories. And like I was telling Bob, the stories that people are telling, are not being told. And he says one of the reasons is that, especially his generation, that so many people are dying now, and there's nobody to tell the story. And I'm trying to get as many of these stories on the record, so there is some sort of there is a record on it, so
Right.
people can find out more about where they're living and what their upbringing is. And it's just really, really spectacular. And the more I'm digging, the more information I'm digging up, the more I'm surprised about the history of this town.
Yeah. It's
So
amazing.
that's gonna conclude. Yeah, it is crazy. So this is gonna conclude our episode for this week. Probably for the month. We probably won't have another episode on till March. So I just remind everybody, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Please follow us. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you'd like to be on the show, please let us know. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for watching. You have been watching Beyond the Green, Tales from Morristown, New Jersey. I am Peter.
And I'm Terry.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you.